From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see some friendly, regular faces and also some new folks out here tonight. My name is Nicholas Brown. I am a music specialist and concert producer here at the library. Very pleased to introduce to you two wonderful colleagues. On my far left is Herve Boutry, who is the directeur général of Ensemble Intercontemporain. Ah, merci. Yeah, I really have been practicing. It's kind of funny. And to my immediate left is Matthias Pintscher, who is the music director of the Ensemble and also a distinguished composer. We're very thrilled to have them both here to share some thoughts with you this evening before a super exciting concert, which is the Ensemble's DC debut. So let's kick it off. Tell us a bit about your impression of DC so far. No politics.
Well, we arrived yesterday night, and we enjoyed the fantastic acoustic of the Coolidge Auditorium. And we are very happy to be here because it's for us also the conclusion of a wonderful tour through the US. We started some days ago, I did two weeks ago in Berkeley. We had 4 days residency there and 4 days in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And these residencies were interactive with the universities and had a different focus on the repertoire because it was, of course, more contemporary on one side. We have a very contemporary program tonight too.
We're so classical tonight, yes.
But tonight we have also classical repertoire, and so that's my first impression or expression from Washington D.C. up to now.
I mean, it's obviously beautiful to see this city, and I've been to D.C. many times, but I think never at that time of the year where you see the beautiful foliage of the leaves, and we're very fortunate with the weather and the sun, which is also kind of irritating and confusing because it is just not normal. And I don't really know what to think of it. But I mean, right now we just walked over, and I was going through some manuscripts of Beethoven and Schoenberg and Copland, and we received the news from what is going on in this very moment in Paris. So it is emotionally very, how can I even put it? I'm really moved. And now, but this is exactly what makes an artist, because now we may or have to play this concert with all these emotions that go on, and it's the only thing we can do because we're not in Paris right now. So what we can do is just to keep doing exactly what we believe in, which is play the music in the most beautiful way so it brings people together. I'm really emotional. It's very disturbing what is going on.
You have to explain.
Yeah, well, I got the feels that you all needed info, so don't worry about it. There's been news within the last couple hours of a major series of attacks in Paris. And if you have people living in Paris, please, probably you want to check in with them as soon as you can. And it's not clear who or why or the extent or anything like that yet. So tonight will probably be a very difficult and emotional evening for everyone who's going to be on stage. So with that note, with a program like this evening's, where there's some very highbrow art music that is, the creme de la creme in terms of repertoire, and then we have some really great new repertoire. What can we gain in terms of human experience from this type of music, particularly tonight's program?
We gain from it what we have. And it brings us directly to that question that's being put out over and over and over again. Like when audience members ask me or someone, you, what should we listen for? Can you tell us something that helps us to be guided through a piece? And I said, well, you're the guide yourself. You listen with your ears, and you listen with the qualities that you have. I mean, listening means to involve yourself. And I think with all great art, and it could be visual, it could be sonic, you find something about yourself. And it's not really, it's kind of, the artist is stepping back and hands it over to you. And I think that is what makes it very, very beautiful. And music describes time. So the one thing we have to accept is that someone else has defined a certain span of time for us, which nowadays seems to be becoming something that's almost uncomfortable, because we are so used to being in control of how we define the flow of time. We zap through something, we stop something, we turn something off. And when you listen to sound and music, you can't do that. You have to sit there. I mean, you can walk out, but you have to listen to 13 pieces or 13 minutes or 25 minutes or 70 minutes of music that someone has designed and conceived for you, because he believes, or she, in how that time is happening. So it enables us to completely let go, and I think that's a beautiful condition. And people sometimes feel the opposite, that they don't feel qualified enough because they might not know enough, but everyone is the most qualified listener anyway. There is no such thing as a qualification. You can know more about music, but it doesn't help you to understand music. So just listen, and listen to what you have. And it's that easy.
Thank you. That was really great. Maybe to switch back to regular topics now, because I guess we're going to get pretty emotional here. But Herve, could you tell us a bit about how your relationship and the ensemble's relationship began with Matthias, and how that grew into his current role as music director?
I have been with this ensemble already 20 years. And I have been very close to Pierre Boulez when he asked me to come. And I must say, it is what we live at the moment is a very fortunate time, because after so fantastic years, we are now getting, like any organization, you have changes, evolution, and we have the impression now that Pierre Boulez is no longer in the condition to be very present with us. He's, of course, in contact with us, but not physically present. We have the impression to become adult, and not to be the children of Pierre Boulez. And this has been enhanced very, very strongly from the moment when Matthias Pintscher has been sharing our destiny, because it happened like good food, or we say in French. In 2011, we appointed him in June 12, and he started with the ensemble in 2013. And I say that because it is not, I want also to make a distinction between what an ensemble looks like. We are not a small orchestra. We are a group of soloists, a group of individuality, strong personalities. And what is very important in such a group is to be able to always ask yourself, why are you performing it together? And when you have somebody like Matthias, when you have these personalities, at this very moment, I have the impression you are on the right way to go very much further in aesthetically, musically, in the artistic experience. That's my statement now, if you ask me about my relationship with the ensemble.
Great, thank you. Is there a noticeable change in the focus of the ensemble now and moving forward versus in the past few tenures of music directors?
There is a very big change because it's not only the music directors, it's also the world which has changed. The music world is changing all the time, and I think in the 10 last years it has been very obviously opening up. The music world is going from a more from a quite segmented attitude in the past, where modern institutions or people were modernists, and now you have, or classical or Baroque had to be authentic, and now you have, I think, a different trend, which is to try and go to the root, to the essence of the music, and to try and find not a common denominator, but a stronger experience, particularly in this time where internet, where one can imagine that 15 or 20 years ago we didn't have internet as we had it now, and I can absolutely, it's absolutely obvious with young composers that they are writing in a world with internet differently than they were writing before. The relationship with the past, the relationship with the others has changed. And that's also explaining the evolution of the ensemble. The ensemble is an institution, a contemporary institution, and has to move forward in this environment and tries to do it on the most pertinent way.
Do you feel a weight on your shoulders as a successor of Boulez in your role?
I would rather, and honestly, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant because I really don't mean it that way, but I almost feel more encouragement than weight, because everything that Boulez cared about is the passing on and the sharing. He might be even the only one who has been almost aggressively curious about what we do. And all these encounters I had with him and everything that built our friendship and our connection is based on his curiosity of hearing me, what I was struggling with, what I wanted to know. And every time, that goes years back now, when I was conducting a major new work of the repertoire of the 20th century, I'm talking about Debussy, Ravel, Bartók, Schoenberg, he was so generous to share his time with me, and I mostly went to Baden-Baden, and we sat there on his Corbusier couch for hours and hours and hours and shared. So I rather feel a tremendous enlightenment than the weight. But of course, but he would be really, really, and he is very excited to see that we are moving things forward, whatever that means, because the movement itself of going forward, and I'm not talking of avant-garde, but just the keeping, that fact of the condition of keeping walking is way more important than the sensation of arrival. Fulfillment puts everything in question. We always go back to the score, and we're an institution that is living on the basis of all the scores that have been conceived and that are being produced right now and that hopefully will be written in the future. This is Boulez. Boulez is look at the score and take it from there. And it's not about me and how I define that fortepiano because I like it that way, or no, it needs to come out of the score. And I rather take that as a tremendous potential of inspiration than feeling intimidated. And I hope you understand it right about yeah.
I think it's wonderful to hear that perspective because at least in people that come up through the U.S. system and knowing whatever happened with him in New York Phil, there's just this aura around him that from when you actually hear from someone who knows him and interacts with him on a very personal level, that sort of being isn't the reality. So it's such a treat for us to have you all here to give us the real honest perspective on his legacy. tell us a bit about your recent performance of Répond in Paris.
Well, Répond is, some people consider it as his opus maximum, and but he wrote many opus maximi, yeah. Op maximi, is that the Latin plural? I've never said that. But Répond culminates in an ingenious way of really combining the electronics and real sound to a level that is maybe really unbeaten. It's a work that is driven by a great sense for color and virtuosity, which are two aspects that very much define partly what we consider as French. But underneath that, there's a great level and depth of expression. And I always like it very much to compare Boulez to Ravel, because they're composers, they're personalities that were very, very conscious about how to set up a composition, but then also to allow it to fly and enhance the richness that is living inside. Very controlled from the outside, but equally strong and emotionally on the inside. And so in that aspect, for me as a colleague, if I may call myself so, it is fantastic to sit down and be a scholar and read and analyze those scores, but at the same time, when I can just abandon all that and perform the music from the performer's angle, it is equally strong. And there's not that much repertoire that is being written or has been written recently that has both those qualities, which are extremely appealing to me personally.
I want to add something, which is that Pierre Boulez is also a personality who has a global vision of his artistry, and for him, art is not only writing music on a paper, it's also conducting, it's also working with musicians, but it's also working with architects, with people from all sorts of disciplines. And there is a very strong element in Répond, which affects me very strongly, of course, because it's the architecture of the whole. It's a work which has to be performed with the ensemble in the middle and the soloist around the audience. And the electronics transforms the sound, and the electronic is projected in addition to the acoustic sounds. And it was very obvious this year. We performed it 3 times in very different places. And I know that it is a challenge which Pierre had considered as part of his work, this challenge to find the best conditions. And among these 3 halls, we had a hall which was very reduced and without big interest. We had a fantastic place in Amsterdam, which was originally a gasometre. I don't know what it is. You know, a tank where you put the gas, and it has been transformed in concert hall or performance place, which was fantastic because it's completely symmetrical. You have the ensemble in the middle. You have 1,200 people around. But more important, more fantastic was the performance at the Philharmonie de Paris, which is a new hall which has been opened in January this year. And I dare to say that without Pierre Boulez, this hall wouldn't have been built. It is really a hall which combines all the characteristics of what somebody like him would have dreamt. And it is a fantastic acoustic even for classical music, but it offers also extraordinary experience to the audience when it is used for amplified music. So it was a sort of consecration, actually, of the different dimensions of Pierre Boulez, a composer, performer, inspirator of all sorts of people.
Wonderful. Could you tell us a bit about your new recording projects? I know there was a new release just a couple weeks ago, and hopefully there's more to come.
I mean, we're obviously very excited to sign a deal with a recording company, but also at the same time, you realize that it is kind of outdated to produce records. I still personally, but I'm super old-fashioned anyway, because I'm still writing my music with pencil on paper, etc., etc. So I also still appreciate having a CD in my hand, and I like the booklet, and I take it out and I look at the pictures, and I appreciate it. I do appreciate it, and also I appreciate the fact that the CD has to be put into a CD player that is mostly with much better acoustics than just listening to on your MacBook Pro. And that's actually what does happen if you download all that on iTunes. It's just
yuck was the word up here.
So, yeah, taking that detour. Yes, we are producing now 2 CDs per season with a French label. It's called Alpha. It's part of the Harmonia Mundi group, and they give us. It is not anymore. Out here, sorry. See, I'm getting it all wrong, and they do something with us and to us, which is wonderful as an institution to have, which is they give us somewhat une carte blanche. They give us a completely free hand to choose and to present of what we believe in, and we. Both, like the record producers and us, the artistic team, have come to the conclusion that it might be interesting to even compose the content of a CD. So, because nowadays in the real concert world, where people are less and less inclined to subscribe themselves to a concert series of their favorite philharmonic orchestra or whatever it would be, but want to decide in the moment, that really puts weight on our shoulders, because we have to think more and more and more carefully of how we compose a program, and I think that should naturally also reflect on our choices of what we put on a CD. And mostly in the past we have been talking about monographic CDs, like one composer, so you pair Beethoven 5 and 7 on one CD. We do it completely different, because we want to tell stories on one CD that could even comprise of the most diverse compositional personalities, but that in the end represent something like a concert experience. So you can also go to track 4 and listen to your Charino or your Varese, but also you can listen to that CD as if you were to go to a concert. And it is an idea, and we'll see if it translates, but we just released our first CD, and so far it seems to be a tremendous success, but also on the base of the quality of the playing. These players are, and you will hear it in a couple of minutes, are just phenomenal. And it's a metaphor, but what they touch really turns into gold, because there's so much respect and tradition and comprehension of it. It goes all these almost 40 years back now, and we have a repertoire, yes, but we always build on the repertoire, and we're basically living in 3 different times at the same time, which is the present, but we look back at the repertoire that we have been part of and have also generated, and the foreshadowing, which is we are contemporary music orchestra. We give out commissions. We invest in the future. We are investing a lot of time in researching of who should join our family and whom we support and whom we believe in. So it's and I will close. It's a long answer. Forget. But as we talk about Pierre Boulez, one of the things it was during our first lunch we had 15 years back. He talked about how fascinated he is by the architecture of the Guggenheim Museum in New York, where you wind yourself up through that spiral, and you're always in 3 times because you're here and you look at that image, but you can always look back and still see what you have seen, and you can already take a sneak peek and what's coming up and so on. That, you know, living and perceiving and feeling in 3 different times at the same time is an ingenious concept, and we're somehow trying to reflect that in what we do with the CDs.
Fantastic.
But you can also download them on iTunes for the people who need to know.
How has your live broadcasting of concerts impacted your I don't want to say name recognition, but the way that your artistic sort of vision is permeating beyond your sort of core audience?
I don't know. I think the broadcasting is something which gives a sort of insight or in listening in something happening in a concert hall. It's more documentation, because I am not a good radio listener personally, but though I believe that it is very important for an institution to be broadcasted for the people who simply physically cannot be in the concert hall. But for me, it comes in a second row in the hierarchy. In fact, I think we are quite regularly supported by the French public radio. Almost the majority of our concerts are documented. I find very interesting, more interesting, the editorial aspect of these specialized radio, because then they can provide something which you cannot get in a concert hall. A conversation with a composer, discussion about what you have just heard. And I think in this respect it is very helpful to disseminate what we are doing. And I think it has really been important in the history of the ensemble and just in the communication with the people.
Great. And one other topic before we open up to a couple questions. What is your funding model like? Because I know it's completely different than what we're used to here in the United States for any art music ensemble. So the heavy US reliance on private funds generally and some public grant money.
The ensemble has an overall budget of 6 million euros a year. 4 million is coming from public subsidies. 2 million are coming from the income or from sponsors. Actually, the sponsors are a ridiculous part among these 2 million. And this is a quite, of course, in comparison with American institutions, it's like another planet, because I think for you the proportion of subsidies is very low. But among French or European music institutions, the ensemble has a quite challenging model. There are very few orchestras, public-funded orchestras, which have such a big amount of income from selling the concerts and sponsorship. And we are doing well. We cross our fingers because it's always tough, but the quality of the ensemble and the strength of our image is really, I mean, the core of our economic success.
Wonderful. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So if you could raise your hand, and then my colleague Jay will come to you with a microphone in the back. Looks like we have up here in the front.
Sure. I'd like to ask a question that explores what you mean by musical understanding. I believe your answer to that first question pertained more to the way that people have their own way of understanding. But I got the impression from the avant-garde of the 60s that in many cases composers were inventing their own language, sometimes with each composition. Whereas in other cases, listeners might want to look for allusions or understanding based upon all of musical history. So, any comments on that?
Well, let's maybe take this back a couple years more and look at what happened after the Second World War. Now, talking about what has been written and composed in Europe after the war, and it seems like there was a certain need for some objectivity in what was composed, because everything had fallen apart and the people were so speechless, and they somehow didn't have the courage or were not feeling strong enough to just continue to be just subjective, and they needed to objectify themselves. And that's why that music was written in the 50s and even the 60s so extremely organized, because maybe a majority of the composers in Europe felt like they needed to be able to argument why they put that F sharp here and why they don't use the double basses in the second movement, and all these decisions had some argumentation handy and ready to go. And then with growing courage, people again all re-immerse themselves in the pleasure of living a diversity. And then all of a sudden, even like the major works of the 70s allowed again that quality of physicality, color, and yes, emotion to be re-included. And that's why I always plead my case to the listener to please not be so strung up on the fact that we think we can understand a piece of art, because that's what happens to us when we go to school. And when I was being taught how to understand the Second Viennese School, and in particular a work by Anton Webern, where the melody is being played that way, and then it's being played backwards, and then it's mirrored, and you just mark this all with differently colored crayons, and basta, and you think you understand the piece. That's what happened to me. But no one was talking to us about why that low flute with all that air in the sound had this erratic quality, why that low note on the celesta, that D flat in Opus 10, why that note doesn't really, well, the physicality of the instrument doesn't allow that note is not any more brilliant, but it contains so much emotion. And I wish, and that's what I'm doing with my students at Juilliard, we do a completely new way of analyzing a work. We do an erratic analysis. No more crayons. We just talk about what we hear. And I so wish that the listener could just do exactly the same. Leave your crayons at home. And no, I'm serious, because we are so determined by thinking in analogies and then feeling accomplished when we understand a piece of art. When, like in a Dvorak symphony, do you understand the piece? I don't. I mean, I know a lot about it, but I don't understand it any better than you or you. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. But I feel like if it goes to the listening, this is where the emotions are kept. That is the vessel of music. And we are all emotional. Why can't we allow that very naturally to happen in that encounter with sound, and even the sounds we have never heard before? It's a long discussion, but also sometimes it just feels good to aggressively not discuss it anymore, because then you're on yourself, and I'm not guiding you, and I'm not telling you what to listen for, because you have to listen. And it's much more beautiful if you listen to what you hear than what I tell you what you should hear in a piece of art.
Great. We have time for one very short question that will require a short answer. So who's got that? Great.
Maybe. There's a big difference in terms of multilingualism between Europe and America. And following on your comment just now about auric training, do you have any approach on how how to train an ear that has not grown up listening to many sounds. Is there a way of reprogramming the ear?
She's a techie.
Well, I will be short. I mean, as I have to be, but if, as you say, if you have little experience, or someone has little experience, or is not thoroughly trained, it's even more fantastic because you hear everything fresh. It's like when a kid looks at the first time at a Monet painting or tastes a banana for the first time. Wow. So, there you are. That was a short answer.
Wonderful. Well, a huge thank you to Herve and to Matthias. Tonight is a very... Thank you. Tonight is a very historic occasion for the library series, to be able to present the DC premiere of one of the greatest, most important musical ensembles in the world. Without question, it's an objective statement. And you know, for all of us to grow up, just holding this huge regard for your ensemble and to finally have you here is just such a thrill that I think hopefully all of you are feeling as well, and I think it's going to be quite a spectacular evening for you musically. So again, thank you to Herve and Matthias.
Thank you for having us.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.